You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Alternative Talk 1150 AM. Now, back to the show with local mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell.
You are listening to The Money Hour at 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, November 12th show. You can also listen to my show podcast, Facebook premiere, or you can catch my show on my show YouTube channel. I am your host, Tina Mitchell, and your local mortgage expert. I bring into studio each week the best of the best experts in our local market on everything regarding your money. And now in studio, I have Kyle Williams of IPX 1031 Exchange, all things at 1031 right here on 1150 AM KKNW. And Kyle is my guy when it comes to 1031 Exchange. I have not had anyone else in this space that's come into studio, and he's a regular contributor of the show. So Kyle, thank you so much for coming back. Always and privileged to have you here.
Yeah, I love being here, Tina. It's always, you and I always have these awesome conversations, and I'm always looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, likewise. And I said, before we actually started the show today, in our introductions with everybody, I made a shout out. I've had an opportunity to recently see Kyle in person for one of his presentations, and we don't have enough time here today, and it's not the same as when in person, but Kyle's an amazing guy. You have just a great sense of humor that really brings in to the reality and takes away the dryness of sometimes with the 1031, you get your information across to where it really sticks with people. So just love having you in the show. So, and you need to have somebody, and we're going to, if we have time, we'll get to this a little bit later, but you have to have somebody that you can really trust when they're handling all this money with a 1031 exchange. So Kyle, can you explain what a 1031 is?
Yeah, so a 1031 allows an investor, a real estate investor, to sell their investment property and use all the equity, not just the after-tax equity, to reinvest into something bigger and better. So it's really the greatest wealth building tool for the middle class because they're buying and selling real estate, moving up, and deferring the taxes along the way.
Yeah, anytime we can defer taxes, that is a really great thing. So who uses 1031s?
A lot of people. It's not just real estate moguls that are buying and selling large commercial buildings, but it's like now we'll see young millennials that bought their first rental a few years ago. They've got some equity in it, and they're going to sell that and move up and buy a duplex. So it really runs across the board, and we've heard quite a bit of talk about getting rid of 1031s, and this has come up before, but really 1031 is the greatest wealth building tool for the middle class.
Yeah, it's whether people know that it's out there and that they have that option, because I would imagine there's been a high percentage of people that could have done a 1031 exchange and they did not, and they've lost out on a lot of money. Would that be an accurate statement, Kyle?
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many people will do an exchange and say, I wish I would have known about this before because I've sold, a few rentals in the past and didn't do those and paid taxes, and I could have so much more equity now if I would have done that. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's why I love the fact that I've had this show for the last 11 years, just to really bring in everything when it comes to your finances and how to maximize income and minimize taxes. So we talked a little bit, but I want to go into a little bit more detail of what is the current state of 1031s, and are there any plans, or do you have concerns of them being eliminated into the future, Kyle?
Yeah, so it is coming up more. It's tough to say what will happen with Section Code 1031. And it's really a nonpartisan thing because Trump got rid of personal property 1031s, which was a big chunk of the 1031 market a few years ago. And now the Biden administration has talked about getting rid of 1031s. So, we've seen it before. Every few years, a congressperson might stumble upon 1031 and say, hey, what's this 1031 thing? It looks like a tax loophole. So it's come up before. There's a little momentum now, I guess, with the current state of things. But at the end of the day, again, it's the greatest wealth building tool for the middle class. It generates a ton of revenue. I know that some of the big four accounting firms like Ernst & Young have said that if they got rid of 1031s, it would have well over $100 billion negative impact on the economy over the next decade. So. Wow. It's tough to imagine that Congress would cut their nose to spite their face and get rid of 1031s. So as of right now, I think we're okay, but it's definitely something that people like you and I should monitor in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that would be, it'd be devastating if we did lose them. So hopefully that is not the case. So what are the trends that you see with investors right now, Kyle?
So what's crazy is that after COVID started, and really even before COVID, we'd see more people buying up real estate, maybe buying land in like Montana, for example. And then that got super expensive. And then Idaho got super expensive. And really we've seen, I mean, there's still plenty of people coming up here, but in terms of Washington investors, it seems like, many of them go to one of four states: Arizona, Texas, Tennessee, or Florida. But then it's like, well, who's buying property up here? Because obviously they're selling. A ton of people from California, Northern California.
Yeah.
So it's like, if we see people coming into the state, it seems like they're all from California. If we see people leaving the state, they're going to go south. So definitely two huge trends that we're still seeing to this day.
Yeah. All righty. So what are your thoughts on the rates continuing to go up outside of today? Because today, I shouldn't say today, Thursday was the first time that we've seen, I mentioned in my money chat, over 180 basis points improvement on the bond market, and interest rates dropped 0.5% in one day, which is just crazy. We've seen a lot of that happen with rates going up, but not going down. What are your thoughts in rates continuing to possibly go up in the future?
Yeah, it's so the government, I mean, it costs money to service the debt. And the higher the interest rates go, the more expensive it gets. So at the end of the day, I don't think the Fed can push too much further, right? Like we saw, I mean, there was some good news that inflation has slowed down and the markets went crazy. Before I got on, I saw the 30-year mortgage went from like 720 to 660 today. That's an insane move.
Crazy.
But I think a lot of people are getting ahead of it and thinking that, maybe the worst is behind us. In terms of inflation, we may hit some recessionary waves, but hopefully hopefully we're kind of near the top.
Yeah. Hopefully, for sure. So does anything change with the results of the midterms?
I don't think it really changes too much. The Fed theoretically is a nonpartisan organization, and I know, Trump was always talking to, telling Jay Powell he should do this, that, and the other, the Fed chair. And, we know the Biden administration definitely wants them to slow down on the interest rate hikes. And so, but they don't really listen. They play by their own rules. So in terms of what the Fed does, I don't know. I don't think much will change, but, I think we'll hear, it may not be the worst thing either if the Democrats have the Senate and the Republicans have the House. Lame duck, sometimes it's better when Congress can't do anything, right?
Yeah.
And screw things up. So, I hopefully, if there's a split house, then, not too much will move the needle one way or another.
Yeah. So why do people want to work with your company, Kyle?
So 1031s are unregulated. I talk about this in all my presentations, and a lot of money's been lost in 1031s, literally billions of dollars. And it's not to say there's not good 1031 companies out there, because there are, and there's plenty of good 1031 companies. But I've met with numerous exchangers over the years that have lost money locally in 1031 exchanges. And sometimes, it could be cyber theft, sometimes there's fraud involved, but you just need to know who you're working with. Like, their insurance policies should be on their website. What helps with us is that we're a publicly traded company under Fidelity National Financial, so we're audited regularly. Our financials are posted online. We're perfectly transparent with everything. So again, you just need to do your due diligence when you hire a qualified intermediary for your 1031.
And that is a huge takeaway if you're listening to the show, because the financial security of a company that is holding on to those funds for your 1031 exchange is critically important, right, Kyle?
100%. And yeah, when you talk about holding funds, it's like you really need to know who that is, because at the end of the day, in an unregulated market, I mean, we've seen any number of scenarios play out. But I mean, what if someone is holding your money and investing it? What if they're putting it in Bitcoin, making money on your money, and they tell you it's in a bank account, right? So you really need to know who you're working with, because they control funds. In the entire real estate process, escrow never truly controls funds. Your real estate agent never truly controls funds. We do
Yeah.
as a qualified intermediary. So that's why it's so important to know where your funds are at and who's holding them.
Yeah, absolutely. So how complicated is the 1031 exchange process, Kyle?
It's actually really, really easy. Our role as a disinterested party prevents us from being the client's attorney, their CPA, their financial advisor, really involved in the situation in terms of giving them direction outside of 1031 rules and regulations. So at the end of the day, clients will sign an exchange agreement, some disclosures that allow us to hold funds. And then really their job is to find new property. So the hardest part is not the paperwork or getting the exchange set up. The hardest part, especially in our market up here in the Northwest, is finding new property.
Yes, absolutely. So I didn't realize this until I met you for the first time and heard one of your presentations on how long the 1031 exchange has been around and how it was created.
Yeah, so that's actually a really cool story, and I'm kind of a nerd, so I like to learn these things. And so it was about 100 years ago, I think 1921, and it was called Section 202. It wasn't 1031, but it really morphed into 1031. And it was for farmers who wanted to rotate crops, similar things to that. It was a true exchange. It was a true deed swap 100 years ago. And there was actually a guy in the Northwest, his name was TJ Starker, who kind of challenged that deed swap and took 5 years to complete his deed swap. And the IRS challenged him. I think that case wrapped up in the late 70s. And by 91 or 92, the IRS had come up with some of the rules that we see today. So yeah, it's been around for 100 years and about 30 years or so in its current form.
Yeah, that's crazy. So let's talk about the term like kind, what that means for your 1031 exchange.
Yes. Another question that comes up regularly with clients. They may be selling a rental and they're like, hey, can I buy this land over in Montana? Because I heard about this like kind thing. So it probably doesn't work, but I figure I'd ask. It does work.
Yeah.
Any type of real property held for business or investment use is like kind. An idea for people out there that are landowners. Owning land is great. There's a lot of reasons to do it. But many landowners, if you talk to them, they've made money just like everything else, all other real estate that's gone up over the last 20, 30, 40 years. But if you ask them, hey, have you thought about selling this property? They'll say, what am I going to do? Pay taxes and buy something just as expensive?
Yeah. They
don't know that they can do a 1031 exchange and actually sell that land, put that stagnant equity to work and exchange into something like a duplex or a rental where they can start collecting income every month. They can get the tax benefit of depreciation because they don't know they can do that. And then even if they understand 1031s, they have no idea that like kind means they can sell that land and exchange into something like a rental, for example.
Yeah, and it's one of those areas that is just surprising of how many consumers don't know that it exists or how it actually works. Let's talk about the time frame that you have in being able to secure and find a new property once you start that 1031.
So yeah, after the clients close on their sale, they have 45 days to identify new property to purchase. That 45 days is like some crazy time warp. It will fly by.
Yes.
So we make sure clients know, don't drag your feet, find something as soon as you can, because 45 days isn't a lot of time, especially in this market. So 45 days you have to identify, which means let us know in writing what you intend on purchasing. Ultimately, you have 180 days in total to close on what you've identified. And a lot of people say, well, I need more time to identify. I don't need 6 months to close. Well, there's a lot of new builds going up everywhere in this country. And sometimes people do need the full 180 days to close. So that it's there if you need it. But the most important part is finding property within that 45-day period.
Yeah. And it's easier now that we've had the market shift, but definitely caused challenges when, with the lack of inventory and you're competing against 15 other buyers to see if you're going to get the property, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Kyle, how long do you have to hold your investment property before you can do an exchange?
So this is interesting because with 1031, as with much of the tax code, it's made up of gray area. Mm-hmm. And so this squarely falls in the gray area, but it's a very common question because the IRS has said that flips don't qualify. there needs to be long-term intent to hold for business or investment use. Well, what does that mean? Well, the IRS hasn't really defined it. Elsewhere in the tax code, when they say long-term, they mean 1 year or greater. But some CPAs say hold for 2 years just to be safe and remove all doubt. But even then, clients may have long-term intent, and they bought a rental in January, say a $800,000 rental in Linwood, and they get an unsolicited offer today, 10 or 11 months later, for 1.1 million from a developer who's buying the entire block. Yeah. And then they're like, well, I haven't held it for a year. Can I still do an exchange? We'd refer them to their CPA, but many times the CPA will say, absolutely, your intent was not to flip this property or sell it. You got an offer that it would be silly for you to say no to. So absolutely do an exchange. So the broad rule of thumb is if you hold for a year, get some sort of rental, business use, rental income that you can report, you're probably okay, but it's really a case-by-case basis, which is why we encourage clients to talk to your CPA, see what they say.
So Kyle, what do you see as the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to a 1031 exchange?
So probably waiting too long to look for property. 45 days in your head, it sounds like a lot of time. And we see a lot of clients, even today, that they'll close on their property and they'll kind of be looking here and there, and then they'll start scrambling once they realize, 25, 30 days in, hey, there's not a ton of inventory out there. Even today, we've seen more inventory pop up on the market, but, clients can't wait. They can't drag their feet on identifying property.
Yeah. So outside of what we've talked about today, Kyle, are there any other myths out there when it comes to 1031?
So one of the common myths is because 1031s used to include personal property too. A lot of business owners, like restaurant owners, want to exchange their equipment, non-real estate stuff that pops up all the time. But clients can only exchange real property. Yeah. So if you own real property and you're unsure whether it qualifies, this could be, like a 30-year lease. That's actually exchangeable as fee simple property. Many other things, commercial, retail, water rights in our state, a lot of things you can really get off in the weeds on like, kind, and what you can exchange. But yeah, if anyone listening has questions on, I own this 40-year ground lease, would this qualify? Feel free to reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to help answer those questions.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Anything else coming up on the horizon, or any last shout out that you'd like to make today for my listeners?
For questions, we're here to answer those. We want clients. A big thing too is that if you own real estate, you should have a good CPA. I can't stress that enough, because there's clients, people would. I'm still surprised to this day when I hear clients that have millions of dollars in real estate and they do TurboTax. And it's nothing against TurboTax, but there's a lot of things that you're probably missing. I encourage people, if there's any advice I can give, work with a good CPA, work with a good financial advisor. Lender, broker, you need to have good professionals in your corner. You can't do it yourself. And even if you can, do you have the time to do that?
Yeah. And the time, you have to have the time and the expertise in the constant changes that happen. And that's the why behind the show, was to create a platform where I brought in the best of the best when it comes to anything regarding money and how to navigate and get you connected with those people. So, and that's why you're here, Kyle. Kyle, thank you so much for coming back on the show and being my 1031 guy.
Yes. Thanks, Tina. I appreciate it.